Welcome, friends. What if I told you that the founder of Hyundai, one of the world's largest car companies, began his life barefoot in muddy fields, never attended college, and was once so poor that to chase his dream, he ran 120 kilometers on foot because he couldn't afford a train ticket? This isn't a motivational speech or a work of fiction. This is a true story. Today you will hear the story of a boy who started with nothing and built an empire. A boy with no money, no education, and no power, who possessed one thing that changed his life, the resolve to never stop trying. But why? Should you listen? Because this story is about more than just business. This story will teach you how to fight back when life strikes you, how to believe in yourself when no one else does, and how to stand tall when the world closes its doors on you. And yes, this story will also improve your English. How? Because you are not merely watching English, you are feeling it, living inside the narrative. That is the true secret to fluency. It isn't found in grammar books or tedious vocabulary lists, but in real stories filled with genuine emotion, told in simple, clear, and powerful English. So listen closely. This video may not just teach you English, it may change your life. Now, let us begin the story of the man who started it all. Part 1. The boy who had nothing. Let's go back in time. Year is 1915. We are in a small, impoverished village in North Korea, yes, before Korea was divided. A boy named Chung Roo-young is born to a family of farmers. They cultivate rice. They reside in a house with a straw roof, eat simple meals. Sometimes it is not enough. He is the family's eldest son, which means he must work in the fields every single day. No shoes, no toys, no time for dreams. From the age of 7, he carries water, cuts grass for the cows, and helps plant rice. His father is a strict man who believes in a single rule: work hard and do not dream. Farmer's son must be a farmer. But young Chung was different. Even as a child, he yearned for more. He would gaze at the mountains and wonder, is this all there is to life? When he was about 14, a dream took hold. He wanted to study, go to school, learn mathematics, become a teacher. So one day he secretly fled his home and walked for miles to enroll in a school. But his father discovered his plan. Furious, he dragged him back to the farm. Stop dreaming, his father commanded. Dreams don't feed hungry mouths. This was the first time life had told him to stay small. But something inside Chung refused to listen. A few years later, he tried again. He left home with very little money, but a very big dream. This time, his destination was the city, Seoul. He didn't have enough for a train ticket. So what did he do? Ran. Yes, he ran. 120 kilometers on foot. With no phone and no food. Just the conviction that something more existed beyond those rice fields. Upon reaching Seoul, he found a job at a construction site. He labored with bricks and cement from sunrise until sunset. His hands bled, his back ached. But every night, he promised himself, one day I will not just build houses. I will build something far, far greater. After months of grueling work, he saved enough to start a small venture. With a partner, he opened a tiny rice shop. It was his first taste of business. But one day, his partner vanished, taking all the money. He lost everything. Many would have returned to the village. But not Chung. He wiped his tears and declared, money can be stolen, but not my fire, not my vision. He started over, from nothing. Once more, over the next few years, he took any job he could find. Carrying bricks, delivering salt, fixing bicycles, cleaning shoes. He observed, he listened, he learned, not from textbooks, but from life itself. Slowly, he came to understand how business operates, how people think, and how to earn respect. Not just money. Finally, in the 1940s, Chung established a small construction business. He built roads and repaired bridges. His work even began to attract the government's attention. And then, World War II came to an end. Korea lay in pieces, broken, divided, but Chung saw an opportunity. Where others saw ruins, he saw the roads of the future. Part 2, Building from Ashes, the birth of Hyundai. We concluded part 1 with Chung Ruyong opening a small construction business. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because the world he was entering, Korea in the 1940s, was not a world brimming with hope. It was a nation newly liberated from decades of Japanese occupation. But this freedom did not feel like freedom. The country was shattered, poor, in ruins. No proper roads, no clean water, no major companies, no system. Korea was like a body with a heartbeat but no skeleton, yet where others saw emptiness, Chung Ruyong saw potential. He believed if the country is broken, then we must be the ones to rebuild it. We, the people, must become the builders. Step 1. In 1946, at around 31 years of age, he officially launched his company. He called it Hyundai, which in Korean means modern. Consider that. A man who grew up barefoot in rice fields, without a formal education, started a company named Modern. He didn't just want to build roads. He wanted to construct the future. Initially, Hyundai was a small construction firm. They built roads, bridges, and repaired buildings, mostly minor jobs. But his mindset was always different. Most would say, "We're too small for big projects." Chung, however, said, "We are small because we never take on big projects." He began bidding for larger jobs. He took calculated risks. He hired people who were smarter than him, and he watched everything like a hawk. He didn't stay in an office. He visited the construction sites himself. He spoke with the workers, inspected every stone, every brick. He believed that if you build something, it must be strong enough to support the future. The Korean War. In 1950, war erupted. North against South. Brother against brother. Cities burned. Thousands perished. For many businesses, it was the end. But for Chung Ruyong, it was the start of something immense. He did not run. He did not shut down Hyundai. He surveyed the destruction and thought, the country will need roads again. The country will need buildings again, and I will be the one who builds them. He began collaborating with the South Korean government, helping to reconstruct key infrastructure. His employees were not just laborers. They were rebuilding their own homeland. This made Hyundai stronger, not just as a company, but as a name. People started to trust the name Hyundai. Because when everyone else was afraid, Hyundai kept building. One of the most defining moments of Jung's life occurred in the 1960s, when the South Korean government presented him with a challenge. We need a bridge over the Han River. Can you build it? Now, here's the truth. Hyundai had never constructed a bridge before. Rival companies scoffed. They said he doesn't even have an engineering degree. He's not a bridge builder. He's just a construction guy. But Chung replied, if we always say we can't, we will never learn how. So he accepted the project. He assembled a team, hired engineers, meticulously studied every blueprint, and visited bridges across the globe. Then he began to build. Every day he stood by the river, observing, planning, and making corrections. After just 4 months, the Han River Bridge was complete. The very people who had mocked him now stood in awe. A rice farmer's son had just built one of Korea's most vital bridges. This was more than a bridge, a message to the world. South Korea is rising, and Hyundai is helping it rise. After the bridge, Hyundai's reputation soared. The government's trust in him grew. He was awarded contracts for highways, dams, ports, and shipyards. But Chung was not satisfied. Deep down, he still remembered being a poor, shoeless boy. He wanted more than just money. He wanted a transformation, he declared. We cannot just copy the world. We must create. So he made a decision that stunned everyone. Hyundai will build ships. People laughed again. South Korea has no experience in shipbuilding. We don't even possess the technology. But Chung smiled and said, then we will learn. We will start. We will try. He met with British shipbuilders, convincing them to form a partnership. He studied shipyards. He purchased land in Ulsan, a South Korean fishing village, and proclaimed, this place will become the heart of Korea's industrial future. People considered him mad. But by 1974, Hyundai had launched its first major vessel, becoming one of the premier shipbuilders in the world. From mud to metal, from rice fields to global factories. Chung was no longer just building a company. He was building a dream factory. By the end of the 1970s, Chung had built roads, bridges, buildings, ports, and ships. One thing was still missing: cars. South Korea imported all its vehicles from Japan and the West. But Chung posed a dangerous question. Why can't Korea make its own car? No one had an answer, so he did it himself. And that is where the next part of this story begins. Part 3. The man who dared to build a car. Chung Ruyong. The boy who once walked 120 kilometers barefoot had now constructed Korea's first highways, shipyards, and ports. He was admired, trusted, and respected. But he remained unsatisfied. Deep down, he remembered something. He remembered how Korea had to import cars from Japan, America, and Europe, and how people believed Koreans could never build a car themselves. They thought, car. Manufacturing was reserved for rich countries with powerful machines and advanced technology. But Chung, as always, believed something different. He believed in his people. He said, "We have built the roads. Now we must build the wheels that will run on them." His team was astounded. Cars, we lack the knowledge. We don't have the engineers. We don't have the tools. But Chung simply replied, "Then we will learn. We will build the tools. We will train the engineers." That is what Hyundai means. Modern, and this is the future. This was not a business decision. It was a national one. Wanted to build a car for Korea, and that is where the story truly takes off. The early 1970s, Chung knew that building. A car demanded something he didn't yet possess: experience. So what did he do? He flew to Britain. He met with George Turnbull, a top executive from British Leyland, a respected British car manufacturer. Turnbull was taken aback. Why would a Korean businessman with no car company want to hire him? But Chung didn't plead or flatter. He simply shared his vision. He said, "I don't want to copy foreign cars. I want to build something new. I want your help." George Turnbull was impressed. He agreed, and he was not alone. Chung hired 5 leading British car engineers experts in engines, transmissions, design, and safety, brought them all to Korea. These engineers arrived in a country that, in many areas, still had dirt roads. They were bewildered, thinking, how can we possibly build a car here? But Chung gave them one thing that changed everything: belief. He told them, "You have built cars before, but now you are building history." They didn't have a sophisticated lab. They lacked high-end machinery and luxury offices. What they had was a single warehouse, and a leader who refused to surrender. It took years of work. The team encountered hundreds of setbacks. Engines wouldn't fit. Parts failed during testing. The body design was too heavy. No company would sell them steel. But every time something failed, Chung didn't shout or walk away. He asked one question: what did we learn? He believed that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path to it. In 1975, after countless long nights, arguments, experiments, and moments of despair, it finally happened. The Hyundai Pony was born. It was Korea's first national car, a small, affordable, simple vehicle. It wasn't as beautiful as a Mercedes or as fast as a Ferrari, but it was proudly Korean. When the first Hyundai Pony was unveiled in Seoul, the crowd fell silent. Then they erupted in applause, cheers, and tears. We can do it. We are not small anymore. But creating the Pony was only the beginning. The real battle started when Hyundai attempted to sell cars outside of Korea. The major global car companies like Toyota, Ford, GM, and Honda laughed. They scoffed. Korean cars, please, they're toys. But Chung had heard this before. When he built bridges, they laughed. When he built ships, they laughed. Now he was building cars, and once again they laughed. But he possessed a weapon they hadn't anticipated: courage, discipline, and a commitment to endless improvement. He started small. First, Hyundai sold cars to countries like Ecuador, Egypt, and Chile. Then, gradually, he entered the Canadian market. And in 1986, he made a bold move. Hyundai entered the US market. They introduced a model called the Hyundai Excel. It wasn't fancy. But it was affordable, fuel-efficient, and easy to drive. Americans were curious, and guess what? In its very first year, Hyundai sold over 168,000 cars in the U.S. It was a record. The same companies that had laughed were now starting to worry. But success was not guaranteed. As Hyundai sold more cars, problems began to surface with engines, air conditioning, and parts. Customers began to complain. American newspapers started labeling Hyundai a low-quality brand. Sales plummeted. Respect vanished. Once again, Chung Ruyang stood at the brink of disaster. His team panicked. They suggested reducing production and halting exports. But Chung said no. He stated, "If we are unwilling to improve, we do not deserve success." So he made a monumental decision. Hyundai would rebuild its entire approach. New quality checks, better materials, more rigorous testing. He declared, "Let's not compete on price. Let's compete on pride." And year after year, Hyundai improved. They didn't just make cars, they made better cars. Now, by the late 1990s and early 2000s, Hyundai had transformed. The world slowly began to see Hyundai not as cheap, but as reliable, smart, and well-built. The same company that once couldn't build a single tire was now winning international car awards. JD Power Quality Awards, Design Awards, and safety recognitions. In America, people started saying, Hyundai is not just a good car for the money, it's a good car, period. After the rise of Hyundai cars in the global market, something remarkable began to happen in South Korea. People no longer saw Hyundai as just a company. They saw it as a source of hope. Because whenever the country faced a challenge, whenever something seemed too large, too impossible, too expensive, there was one man who always said, "We will do it." That man was Chung Ruyang. But this new phase of his life was not about small ideas. It was about rebuilding a nation's future, one massive dream at a time. By the early 1990s, South Korea had been transformed. It had moved from poverty to power, from survival to growth. And a significant portion of that growth had one thing in common: the Hyundai name. Let's examine just how profound Hyundai's influence had become. They weren't just making cars anymore. They were building dams, nuclear power plants, oil refineries, high-speed trains, steel mills, industrial parks, container ships, global expressways, and even South Korea's very first satellite launch site. This was not by chance. This was Jung's mission. He believed, if we only copy the world, we will always be second. But if we build the future ourselves, we can lead. Yes. And the Korean people began to believe it too. You see, Hyundai was no longer just a brand. Become a national symbol. When Koreans purchased a Hyundai car, they weren't just buying transportation. They were buying confidence. They were saying, look at us now. We build our own future. As Hyundai expanded, it became one of South Korea's largest employers. By the mid-1990s, hundreds of thousands of workers across various industries, steel, construction, design, shipping, electronics, energy, were connected to Hyundai. Every job Hyundai created supported entire families. Chung understood this. He knew his responsibility extended beyond business. He once said, "Every time we build a new factory, we are feeding thousands of homes." Business is not only about profit, it is about people. In remote towns where jobs had been scarce, Hyundai opened plants. And when young students graduated with technical degrees, Hyundai gave them their first opportunity. This was more than success. This was impact. You might think that after decades of building, Chung would slow down. But he did not. Even in his 70s, he continued to visit work sites, wearing his trademark gray suit and white safety helmet. He walked through scorching steel factories, dusty ports, and frozen shipyards, talking to workers, asking questions, and taking notes. He never acted like a king. He acted like a foreman, because deep down, he still saw himself as that barefoot boy who once cleaned bricks for a few coins. His hunger for growth never waned. And this hunger led to one of the most audacious ideas of his life. In the late 1990s, when Chung was in his 80s, he shocked the world once more. He announced his intention to travel to North Korea, remember? This was the same North Korea that had battled South Korea in the war, the same politically frozen, dangerous, and closed-off country. Most South Korean businessmen would never dare to go there. But Chung Roo-young was not like most men. He believed, "We are one people. We speak the same language. We must rebuild peace." And so, in 1998, he crossed the border not with words, not with weapons, but with 500 cows. Yes, 500 cows. Why? Because he said North Korea had taken cows from his family's land during the war. Now, in a time of peace, he was returning the favor. Not with anger, but with forgiveness. It was not merely a political move. It was a human one. News channels worldwide broadcasted the image of trucks filled with cows crossing the demilitarized zone DMZ, led by an old man in a suit. It was powerful. It was emotional. It was unforgettable. That single act opened a small door between North and South, and it was Hyundai's founder who turned the key. In the final years of his life, Chung began to step back from day-to-day operations, but he never stopped thinking. His diary, written in simple Korean, contained pages filled with thoughts, ideas, and plans. He still visited his offices, inquired about construction projects, and studied world markets. But his body was weakening. His health was declining. Slowly, the man who once worked 18-hour days, who once ran 120 kilometers barefoot, now walked, with a slower gait, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. He knew his time was short. So he began writing letters to his sons, his board members, and his country, reminding them, "Never be satisfied with what you have built. Keep asking, what can we build next?" In 2001, at the age of 85, Chung Roo-young passed away peacefully. The boy from the village was gone, but what he left behind could never be buried. Following his death, South Korea observed a national moment of silence. TV stations paused their broadcasts. News anchors shed tears. Even his competitors, those who had once criticized him, stood up to pay their respects. Why? Because Chung Roo-young was not just a businessman. He was a builder of dreams, a man who proved that you do not need a college degree to change the world. You do not need permission to build something great. You do not need to be rich to become the bedrock of a nation's pride. He began life with nothing but dust on his feet and a fire in his chest. He ended it with factories, ships, highways, satellites, and the admiration of millions. And today, the name Hyundai travels on roads across the globe in the US and India, in Europe, in Africa, because of the fire he carried within him. Part 4. The Empire after the Builder. In the eternal spirit of Chung Roo-young, when Chung Roo-young passed away in 2001 at the age of 85, South Korea didn't just lose a businessman. They lost a father figure, a symbol of resilience, a man who had been there through war, hunger, and failure, yet never surrendered. His funeral was attended not just by CEOs, but by workers, farmers, engineers, politicians, shopkeepers, mechanics, ordinary people. Some brought flowers, others brought letters, many brought nothing but their tears. They knew that without this man, our country might have followed a very different course. The first months after his death were filled with tension within the Hyundai Group. The empire he had built had grown immense. Construction, cars, electronics, steel, banking, even shipping and IT. But now the leader was gone. People asked, who will lead? Will Hyundai survive? Will it shatter into pieces? In truth, Hyundai had already begun to change before his passing. The Korean government had implemented new regulations to diminish the power of large, family-owned business groups known as chaebols. Hyundai, being one of the largest, was required to restructure. So after Chung's death, his sons and executives made a courageous decision. Hyundai would be divided into multiple companies, each with its own leadership and specialized focus. It was a painful process, but it was also essential. Why? Because Jung's dream was not about one man controlling everything. His dream was about growth, innovation, and freedom. So Hyundai split into numerous companies, including Hyundai Motor Company Cars, Hyundai Engineering and Construction Infrastructure, Hyundai Heavy Industries, Shipbuilding, Hyundai Steel Materials. Hyundai Mobi's car parts, and Hyundai Rotem trains and military equipment. Slowly, each of these entities began to stand on its own. They honored their founder, not by imitating him, but by perpetuating his spirit. Of all the companies in the Hyundai family, the motor company carried the most profound emotional significance. It was the car that had made South Koreans believe in their own strength. So after Jung's passing, Hyundai Motors embarked on a massive transformation. The world still clung to the old image. Hyundai cars were cheap, but their quality was low.